Hey, this is Ronnie LeBlanc from Expedition Bigfoot, and you're listening to the Paranormal Zone.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
A ghostly apparition in the dark of night.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Hey there, ponderers of the paranormal. You are in the Paranormal Zone, your place for all things paranormal, strange, and mysterious. It is guest interview time, and what a guest we had a pleasure and honor to speak with tonight. Yes, we spoke with host of and featured expert on haunted hospitals and haunted 911, award-winning educator, producer, author, inspirational speaker, and paranormal investigator, Morgan KNUDSEN. Morgan's introduction to the paranormal goes back to her great-great-grandfather, who was the president of the Association for Psychical Research of Canada in 1918. Now, if that doesn't spark your interest, then I don't know what does. But you didn't tune in to hear me introduce Miss Morgan KNUDSEN. You want to hear Miss Morgan KNUDSEN. Thank you, everyone. So do you got like about half an hour, Morgan?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Now, when Mike and I met up earlier, and we're kind of touching base about stuff we want to make sure to talk about, you know, in the limited amount of time that we have. And perusing your website, one of the first things that we noticed and we were most intrigued by was your introduction into the paranormal, of what kind of sparked your interest and involved your great-great-grandfather. Could you talk to us about that for a little while?
Yeah, absolutely. So my great-grandfather, Albert Durant Watson, was a really interesting man because he started out very early on as a physician and a poet and an astronomer. He was very well connected within the Ontario and Toronto community. Mike, you can actually still go see his house as a historical spot. And so he was very, very well known there. And what was interesting was that he was a very big time skeptic, like really big time skeptic. And it wasn't until a bunch of his friends got together and they were like, hey, you know, can we like use your house for a channeling session? And he was like, what? What? And they were like, yeah. We've like, there's this guy by the name of Louis Benjamin, and he's the real deal. And so anyway, Albert thought they were absolutely out of their mind, but he was a super nice guy. And he was like, yeah, use the back room. Just like, don't bug me. And so he invites this guy over. And so the curiosity kind of got the better of him. And, you know, he's leaning in and he's listening to this guy who is, I mean, he's young. He doesn't have much of an education. I mean, I think he like dropped out at like grade 8. He's not what Albert was expecting at all. So he's sitting there and these people are like, they're not only asking him questions, but he's doling out this wisdom that is so far past himself and his years and the information that is available generally to people at that time. Like if you guys read the books now, you'd be like, you know, this is like advanced for now. And here, this is early 1900s. And, you know, this guy's coming out with some pretty amazing stuff. And very positive, very joyful, you know, just you know, stuff you want to listen to. And he's going, okay, this is weird. Like, this is not what I was thinking that this was going to be. So he ended up sitting in on these sessions over and over again. And lo and behold, who Lewis ends up channeling is, apart from many others, was Albert's mom, who he didn't know was dead at all. He did not have this information. And Albert was getting information that, I mean, nobody should have known. And he was like, okay, what is going on here? So he started like writing all this stuff down. And it was a group of entities that called themselves the humble ones of the 20th plane. and they were giving this beautifully positive message to the people around them, and the information was just really phenomenal. So he ended up writing 2 books, The 20th Plane and Birth Through Death: The Ethics of the 20th Plane, which were basically transcriptions of these sittings. And I tell you, like, you go back on these things now, and it is still like jewels of information within these books. At the time, his colleagues around him made mincemeat out of him. They were like, "You're out of your damn mind. I mean, you've got a career here, and you're a medical professional, and you're believing in this. Like, what are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And but at the end of the day, he was like, you know, and I mean, he fought with his own doubts, like, okay, maybe I am going nuts. Like, what is this? But at the end of the day, he was like, look, this is what I heard. And he's like, take it or leave it. But this is what I heard. This is what happened. This is what this group experienced. This is real. And it was, yeah, really, really phenomenal. So that was A.D. Watson. And as I say, you can see his house as a historical location today.
I got to look up a lot of that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and there's another road trip for us, Mike.
Yep.
There.
Definitely.
We're always good up for road trips.
Yeah. I'm in northern Minnesota. Mike's in, I guess, what?
Southeastern North Dakota.
Yeah. So
Oh, wow.
that won't be too far of a drive, but yeah.
No, that's not too bad.
No, and it's a beautiful drive. Once you get up into Canada and you start heading west, and man.
Oh yeah, the landscape. You're never going to go wrong with the landscape.
No.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I had an uncle. He's passed away now, but he was up there by Banff and everything, and Calgary, just absolutely beautiful. But anyway,
Mike could go on and on here.
Well, I just love Canada and my family so much.
We have a guest, Mike. Okay, we have a guest.
I know. I know this is not about me. Definitely.
So, Morgan, what do you take by that name, the Humble Ones? I'm intrigued by that. What do you think that exactly? Is there anything behind that, or does that just happens to be what they call themselves?
I think it was deliberate. I think it was something that my impression is that they chose it so that it was never about them lording over the group with information.
Mm-hmm.
They were humble, but they seem to know who they were at a core level as consciousness. They knew who they were, but there was nothing condescending about the information. There was no warnings or evil messages or anything like that. And I think it was chosen as sort of a bridge for people. Like, look, this is how we're coming to the table. We're here to bring you this information. We're not here to, do some ego trip or, make some crazy, seance with ectoplasm or, some crazy, like that's not what the intention. And I think that was the underpinning of the entire session, was that we're here to pass on the information. No ego involved.
No,
It's pure positivity.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, when you had also mentioned like your great grandfathers, like all of his colleagues were kind of like, whoa, what are you doing there, my friend? Do you think that kind of perception of those who are, for lack of a better term, into the paranormal, do you think that kind of negative perception is lessening as we move further and further down the line? Or do you think there's always going to be those kind of pseudo skeptics? That's one of our favorite terms, just people who disbelieve just to disbelieve.
Pseudo skeptics, my biggest pet peeve.
Yes. Yeah. Do you think
don't even give it a chance?
Do you think that kind of overall perception is changing?
Yeah, I do. And I think what's helping to close the gap is not only the medical science that is coming into the picture now, but also the research and the understanding, or the slow understanding of quantum physics. And I think when we've got these two fields that are slowly starting to merge, I think what's happening is that quantum physics is really starting to look at parapsychology, because they've realized that there's such a strong connection there, and that parapsychology had a lot right. Everything from understanding the power of the mind and whether or not the consciousness is fundamental or emergent. We're beginning to understand that consciousness is fundamental to the universe. So all these concepts that were birthed in parapsychology are now being proposed in quantum physics. And so I think now that we've got this merging of fields, it's becoming impossible to not include.
Right. No, I agree 100% with that. I'm pretty sure Mike agrees with that.
Oh, absolutely. And what I was meaning, about, skeptics in general, I mean, I do appreciate them, but like I was going to say, I didn't want to put them in the same category as the pseudo
No,
skeptics.
right. Mhm.
You know, I
Yeah.
just want, because, skeptics are great. They want to, well, Patrick, you are generally a very open-minded skeptic, which is
Right.
fantastic. And it makes for great episodes between him and I. So,
You know,
But yeah.
that's kind of an interesting segue, Mike. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, we Mike and I kind of, we feed off each other for our podcast. And Mike has led a very, very paranormal life, and our longtime listeners know that. We talk about it quite a bit. Do you think that some people are more prone to experiencing the paranormal than others?
Well, it's interesting because when you look at the research that has been done over the years about why certain people are more open to things like clairaudience, clairvoyance, all of that kind of a thing, what's really fascinating is that there are certain characteristics. One of the studies actually that was done very recently was the ability for certain people to be able to sort of get into the zone or tune out. So people like that are very artistic, for instance, that can, kind of zone into a painting, or even like, even athletes that like go into the zone when they're running, like just that sort of meditative state.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And that has been shown to very much heighten the capacity for somebody to have these experiences. Typically people that are, overthinking things, that are, trying really hard to have experiences, typically they just don't. They've had,
And that's Patrick.
Yeah. Well, and they've done many experiments over the years, whether it be Gansfeld experiments, remote viewing experiments, all sorts of things where, the first thing they do is get people to meditate and be able to slow that thinking process down. And the results have been extremely good for people who go in with either an open mind or believing that they're going to have good results. If the people that go in that are just like, no, it's not going to happen, or, oh, this never happens for me, or have that attitude, usually doesn't happen for them.
Right.
So as soon as you've got somebody who's basically, hoping that, or like, I guess, trying really hard to get something to go on, or is negative about it, the odds are it's not going to happen.
Right.
That
makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's gone back in my family, my great grandmother, and then coming down, and I would imagine even before that, but as far as I know, back to my great grandmother. So it's a very, family thing that's gone back. But
yeah, it runs in his veins, apparently.
Another thing I'm proud of.
Yeah,
it's good
absolutely.
to be proud of it, though.
Yeah, and my father, my grandmother, great grandmother. Yep.
I'm looking at some of my notes I had written down. You have a very impressive, well, for lack of a better term, resume. But, I mean, we got like, TV host, award-winning educator, producer, author. We need to talk about your latest book, The Gift of Instinct, inspirational speaker, and paranormal investigator. Our audience would be delighted to hear you talk about some of your experiences, or how you got the gig of being on haunted hospitals and
one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, there was a marathon on haunted hospitals.
I watched a marathon of it today, and I was every second. I love that show.
Awesome, thank you. It's funny. When I was younger, because I didn't actually know about my family lineage until much later. It was before that my interest was piqued, and I had an incident when I was really young where I saw sort of apparition, sort of the faceless apparition, come running at me when I was young. I was like 9.
Wow.
And it terrified me when it first happened, but I was like completely fascinated.
Yes.
Like, what is this? This is amazing. And so years and years and years went by, and I was just, everything that I could get my hands on, I was absorbing. And I ended up meeting my business partner, Stephanie Wirtz, and she and I were still in school together. And she had the same passion for it that I did. And so the two of us we just clicked. I mean, we didn't do anything else. We spent our evenings and our weekends studying. Like, we weren't out at the bars, we weren't dancing, we weren't nothing. This is what we did. And we researched everything to death. And one of the things we were looking for was patterns in what was allowing certain people to have negative experiences versus positive experiences. And from that research over X number of years, our program Teaching the Living was born. And we realized that as we were kind of going along and researching and investigating and going to these places and talking to people and dealing with these individuals, we realized that we had something really unique to offer, and a program that no one else was talking about. And so we began our work with the program and decided, let's see if we can teach some of this. Let's see if we can pass this on to people, because we were having such amazing results with it. And so we put up an ad for our first workshop, which was in this. She had lived in this beautiful condo building, and it had this little sort of kitchen room in the main area where you could rent. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a ton of money. I mean, we were just starting. Both of us were pretty much broke. We put all the money we could into it, and lo and behold, the damn thing sold out.
Wow!
And nice. Everybody showed up, and we're like, oh, okay. And we put this in front of people, and we said, by no means are we, telling you this is right, wrong, or indifferent, but here's what we've come to understand. And it got the ball rolling. And pretty soon after that, it was just one thing after another, and people were really taking to the program, and it just kind of snowballed from that point.
Awesome.
Well, like Mike said, it's one of his favorite shows. And our listeners are big time fans of all paranormal programming. Listen, before we talk a little bit about that, this question always arises. I'm always curious as to our guests' opinions. Are you worried in the least bit that there is an overabundance of paranormal programming on television out there? Do you think it's going to oversaturate,
yes.
Or do you think that's do you think that's no matter what it is, it's a good thing? What do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you've got the good thing about it is that it's made it a household topic. Right. It's
Absolutely.
allowed people to have this conversation, and it allows us to do shows like this where we can sit and talk about it, and people will actually pay attention.
Absolutely.
which is really, really good. But on the flip side, the damn problem is, and this is the issue that parapsychologists and the field itself has been facing since the show started, is that it has really bastardized the core of parapsychology, and the shows are so deadly inaccurate, and they don't represent what the research is at all, that it taints people's opinions of what parapsychology is. So it makes things for universities harder to get funding. And, even though a lot of the universities have these amazing programs like Yale and Oxford and Edinburgh and all these, these major universities, but, in the public's eye, and it's like you were saying, the skeptics as well, they're looking at this going like, this is not science. Right. And they're right. It's not science. Right. And, but the real stuff is, and parapsychology is asking huge questions about human consciousness. And, in the shows, it's about, running around and screaming that there's a demon. Well,
you're right.
Great. Right. Like, it's just, so, I think, I know I would be happier if those shows were just like at least the scripted reality shows were labeled as scripted reality entertainment. Mm-hmm. And then people could make that distinction, because the shows, they're fun. They're a guilty pleasure. It's great, but it's like, don't bill it as real. Like, don't do that. Bill it as entertainment, because that's how these ghost hunting shows are designed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why I took the gig with Haunted Hospitals and Paranormal 911, was because they were just like, we're going to give you cases. We just want you to give your opinion on the cases.
Sure.
And I'm like, I can do that. I was like, whether you like what you hear or whether you don't, I'm going to give you the opinion. And thankfully, my amazing producers were like, yeah, okay. And they've kept me for 4 seasons, so I better be doing something right.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Cases that you see on shows such as Haunted Hospitals, and Haunted 911, they're, as you said, they're a little bit different than some of these paranormal investigation shows. Yeah. Because it's just straightforward, to the point. Like you said, this is what happened. There's no, I hate to use this term, no drama. They're not dramatizing anything to the nth degree. One case always pops out in my head though, and I wanted your opinion on, is what this could have possibly been. Mike and I have talked about this before, and I might be generalizing it too much, but there was a case where, and Mike, help me out if I'm wrong here, where essentially a mother died in a car wreck. She was underwater, and the arriving paramedics or the police officers heard heard a voice, and they were, like, help, help, help.
My baby's in here. Yep. I
Essentially-
believe this was on the 911, Paranormal 911.
And it was, long story short, I mean, I believe it made the news, but these officers and these paramedics, they rushed to her side, and she was passed away, and she was passed away for some time, but the baby was still in there, and they saved the baby. I mean, what is, in your mind, if that case is absolutely legit, what is happening there? I am fascinated by that.
Yeah, and the cases always blow my mind every time I get cases from this show, because they find the most unique stories in the world, I think. But I think every case, that one included, is just a testimony to this idea that consciousness is not emergent from the brain. It's something that is fundamental to the universe, which is what they call in parapsychology the hard problem. And it was a term coined by a philosopher by the name of David Chalmers. And the hard problem has always been, is consciousness fundamental or is it emergent? Is it something that needs a brain to survive, or is it something that is existing around us, and the brain translates it in the same way all our other organs translate things? Like, we translate energy, we translate taste, we translate light into, our eye is not creating the picture, our eye is translating the picture. Is the brain doing the same thing? Is it translating the consciousness? And I think with the evidence and the way things are going right now, in my perspective, I think that is the case.
Okay.
I don't think our brain is rooted in I don't think it's creating what we're seeing by any means. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting when these kind of cases come up, because I think they're just a little bit more evidence to that idea that consciousness is something else. And then when we lose the body, the mind is still in existence. It just might not look the same anymore.
Right. Do you what would be your thoughts here? Now I'm just kind of going rapid fire, things that always just fascinate me. What your thoughts on supposed cases of reincarnation? For some, that popped into my mind right when you said that. How it's the universal consciousness, and our brain is interpreting this, it's absorbing it. When that one vessel, so to speak, like your body passes away, that consciousness remains. Can it enter another physical shell, for lack of a better term?
Well, there's been a lot of studies in relation to this subject. A fellow by the name of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who's kind of known, I think, as the king of reincarnation research throughout the years. And he did a lot of research around children and reincarnation. And what's so fascinating is that, for me, is I think reincarnation could possibly be the best physical evidence we have right now that the consciousness does continue, because these kids don't have a dog in the fight. And there's such bizarre, I mean, I don't believe in coincidences, but I think there's such bizarre happenings with these kids that we have to pay attention to it. And it, again, goes to show that this consciousness issue is likely emergent, or is likely fundamental, because you've got a situation where, every thought that's ever been thought is still in existence. So if that's the case, can we pick up on said thoughts, right? So, we don't know what, I think, conclusively, whether or not it's necessarily a spirit that's translated into another body, but we can definitely look at the idea that there is, if that's not the case, then well, maybe these kids are picking up on the thought that's in the space, that's
right, the energy that's continuing. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's I think there's a lot of theories behind it, but when you get into even Ian Stevenson's research, it's really, really hard to put it down and negate it.
Ian Stevenson.
Yeah.
I've been taking notes that I need to check on.
You're going to really be interested in it. His stuff is phenomenal, and it's so extensive. He did a lot of work in South America with these cases, and they're absolutely mind blowing. Like I don't know how you could explain it any other way.
That's fascinating. Yeah, my brain's kind of melting a little bit right now. It's not because of the warmth. Now, while we still have time here, we need to talk about your books. I mean, what can you tell us about, well, like your new one, The Gift of Instinct? Talk to us about your book and, what it's all about, and Yeah, just lay it on us.
Sure. So it was funny because I wasn't originally intending to write The Gift of Instinct. It came at the urging of a friend of mine who's into folklore, and he was like, no, you got to write another book. You got to write another book. So anyway, The Gift of Instinct, as I was kind of rattling around what I was going to write about, because my first book, Teaching the Living, I covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover. So I was struggling with another. I'm like, what am I going to write for the next one that's going to make it different? And so I realized there was fundamental lessons in parapsychology that I had learned myself throughout the years of doing this 20 years later. And I'm like, there's fundamental core lessons here that go beyond haunted houses that are so important to just everyday life experience. And self-awareness, that I realized that, I could break this down into my top 10 lessons. And if I could pass on the top 10 things that I've learned, what would they be? So I ended up really sitting down and thinking about it. And when I realized what the 10 lessons were going to be, the overall theme I realized was an instinct for more. That the universe calls us to more, and parapsychology calls us to more. And when we follow that calling, once you get hooked in and you follow that calling, then the doors start to open for you. It's really, really incredible. And, you really get this whole connection and a relationship with non-physical, but it's an instinct and everybody's got it to some degree, that there is more than this. And so that's why I called it The Gift of Instinct, was because I thought, that gift, once you get that's there, it's there for everybody, then, and you start to follow these pathways, then, just the world ends up opening up. And so that was the core of The Gift of Instinct, was my top 10 lessons that I learned and how I have learned over the last 20 years of doing this.
Yep. Book I need.
Yep. Absolutely.
I hope you enjoy it. If you get
I wrote it down. Absolutely. I know I will.
Do you find writing enjoyable? Do you like writing?
I love writing. I am writing all the time. I not only the books, but I write for a haunted magazine in the UK as well. And
awesome.
And I write all the podcasts that on supernatural circumstances as well. So so I'm constantly writing something down, and I write for fun too. I have I fiction write and stuff just for the hell of it. So yeah, it's
awesome.
just a blast.
Multi-talented.
Talk about getting into the zone. Writing is much like that as well. You tap into that and you just can't stop. It's like, and before you know it, it's like, man, I have a book.
I did that years ago. Well, when I was in the military, I would sit in the barracks in my dorm room and I would all longhand, just writing and talk about a zone. And I came up with some stuff that it fascinated me even. I'm not saying it was great or anything, but once you get going and you just roll, and you don't, it's like, where is this stuff coming from? And then you look over it and you read what you've done, and it's pretty amazing.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you're right. I think, sometimes it's being inspired. And I think there's a difference between, doing things from an inspired place versus you putting the effort in and thinking your way through it. And, I talk about this, what you're talking about is exactly what I was talking about in The Gift of Instinct, where there's a point at which you're receiving from inspired thought rather than trying to effort your way through it. Right. The second lesson that I have in the book is about the skill of letting go. And it's so fascinating because, like we were talking about before with, what makes some people more prone to this stuff than other people, is that ability to let go. And when you can do that and you kind of get in the zone with whatever you're doing, then all of this inspiration starts to flow. And when you're really paying attention, you kind of wonder, wait a minute, is this me?
Yeah.
Is this me? Is this something else? And it's, in my understanding, it really is something more.
Yeah. So this book, it's available on Amazon, I'm sure, or whatever.
It is.
Okay. Because I know just from hearing you and talking about it, it's definitely would be a great help for me. So definitely.
I please let me know if you
I can do that.
Well, I just got the wonderful 10-minute warning from Zoom.
Yeah, I hate that. We're going to make some changes on that so
Yeah.
these interviews can go a little bit longer.
Morgan, if someone came, I'm just looking at any fast questions here. If someone came up to you just in general and asked you, Morgan, can you tell me what is a ghost? What would you tell them?
Well, it's such a loaded question because
Yeah.
what everybody's definition is different.
Yeah, Patrick's good at loaded questions. So
Yeah, but everybody's definition is different. Some people think that a ghost implies to anything that is paranormal that's going on in a house. Some people refer to that as like something that was a person that's passed over that is now connected with consciousness, and you're interacting with that. Some people believe it's something that's evil and terrible and all of those things. So my definition, I guess, would be that it is a part of the consciousness of what we knew as a physical thing. But it's something that maybe could interact and manifest, that would think in real time, that would act in real time, not something that's just a replay of events going on in a space. But I think that would probably be my definition. But interestingly, to look at the different definitions, it's interesting because culturally it's so diverse.
right, exactly.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's been it's kind of a core of our podcast here. Is again, Mike and I we expound on our own personal theories and stuff, and we go back and forth, and a lot of our interest started. I would say, well, I shouldn't say our interest, but we just happened to run into each other. We had the same job, Mike, 15, 16 years ago. I can't remember how long it was.
Well, at least 18, maybe.
Well, we started talking
at this point.
Yeah, I started talking to this guy, and I realized that he was really into the paranormal, and he had some crazy flipping stories. And then we kind of, here we are 18 years later doing a podcast, talking to wonderful people like you. And the core part of my interest, as Mike knows, is this is not about me, but it's like my father unfortunately passed away when I was 8 years old, and I've always just been fascinated with the idea of somehow communicating with him or knowing that some semblance of him is still out there. So I think that's probably a common underlying reason people are interested in the paranormal. Do you think that that's a positive reason to get into the paranormal, or am I just looking to get hurt here?
No, I think it's a really positive initiation into it. I think it usually is something along that line that intrigues people. Either they're looking to communicate with someone, or they've had something happen that they're going, what was this? I don't understand what happened. Actually, in my book, I write about an investigator by the name of Maurice Grosse. And he was, one of the chief investigators with the Society of Psychical Research. And that was how he got started, was that he was an engineer originally, and he was inventing all sorts of stuff, like moving billboards. And so the moving billboards that we see now were invented by Maurice Grosse, like just crazy things. And his life was going really, really well. And he got the dreaded phone call the one day, which is his daughter had died in a motorcycle accident. It was very sudden. And his whole life came crashing down on him, because he was like what just happened? Like, this was not supposed to happen. And what was interesting was that as he was moving through the grief process and he was finding that joy again, slowly but surely, stuff started to happen around him. There were these signs basically that were showing up, these unexplainable events that were showing up, like, again, drawing him forward, like pulling him forward. And he quit his job. He just dropped his job as an engineer, and he was like, I got to know what this is. And he just went full blown and pursued it. And what was interesting was that his daughter was named Janet. And when he firmly believed that this was what he was supposed to be doing, that his daughter was calling him into this. And lo and behold, the first major case he gets is the Enfield haunting in the 1970s. And the little girl who needed his help was named Janet. And it was it's so profound, because had those sequence of events not happened, he would never have been there to champion for this little girl. And so I think the communication that people are often looking for, like, they think it's going to come in some, like, glowing apparition that's going to show up in front of them.
Right.
but it usually doesn't. It usually has its own language, and the universe has its own language. So when this stuff starts to happen and you start to see these stories, you realize there are no accidents. And, that calling, when you follow it and, you get these communications, it's all so valid and important. So I don't think it negates the importance at all of, why people pursue this.
Yeah.
That's
Mine was actually
great way of putting it.
a literal crash course when I was many, many decades ago. I'm that old. I heard a very large crash in the basement, and it was in my uncle's house in Toronto. And he said that would happen all the time. You go down there, it'd be nothing out of place or anything. But the huge one was when I was about 11 or 12, when I saw a full-bodied apparition, fully detailed, float actually between the TV and I was home alone, and I just went back to watching TV, and it was fascinating. But I loved it. I mean, never really freaked out too much.
Every time Mike tells this story too, I always poke fun at how he says TV. Because he emphasizes, he does it backwards. I'm just kidding, Mike. I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry.
But Morgan, this is, I hate this, but time is running out. But this has been absolutely fascinating. I hope that we can talk again sometime soon. Where can people find your book?
So everybody can find, basically everything that I am doing, and have done on my website, entityseeker.ca. That's not plural, so entityseeker.ca. You can find everything from my live shows, my videos, my books, my podcast, Supernatural Circumstances, that I do with my co-host, Mike Brown. Both books, Teaching the Living and The Gift of Instinct, are both available there. And season 4 of Haunted Hospitals should be airing soon. So,
I can't wait.
I can't wait. Well, Morgan, this has been more than a pleasure. We can't thank you enough.
Fascinating.
Thank you guys.
Absolutely fascinating.